وأكمل التحيات على سيدنا محمد النبي المبعوث بالقرآن العظيم والذكر الحكيم وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه إلى يوم الدين. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل وألهمنا رشدنا يا رب العالمين. Alhamdulillah, in our weekly Quran circle, we are looking at meanings of key concepts of the Quran. And we're looking at a beautiful work by one of the great early Imams of Islamic scholarship, Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi, who combined mastery of the science of hadith with being one of the great Imams, one of the greatest and most influential Imams of the science of Islamic spirituality, with deep mastery of the Arabic language and deep insight into the noble Qur'an. So, and the underlying insight of this work is every word of the Qur'an, every key term in the Qur'an has a core meaning. And all the other usages all return in their meaning back to the one core meaning. And we saw that with guidance, for example, all of it going back to the idea of inclination. And all the other usages of the term huda go back to some form of inclination. Likewise with the usages of kufr, for example, and the other terms that we have seen. Today we're going to look at 4 key terms. Amongst these is walking, meshi, which has 2 primary usages in the Qur'an. The term for dress, libas, which is used in 5 distinct ways in the Qur'an. The term for evil, one of the su', right? And the word su', we can translate as evil or ill, is used in 8 different ways in the Qur'an, but has one root, one core meaning from which all the other usages derive. And one of the many terms in the Qur'an for loss, which is khizi. And we'll look at these. So today's lesson will be in 4 parts. The first is on the term for walking, al-mashi. Right? And meshi has 2 usages. Meshi or walking has right? Now the obvious walking, of course, is walking with one's feet, right? Walking with one's feet physically to a tangible place. Right? So the tangible walking is with one's feet to a physical place, right? But Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi tells us that walking is used in the Qur'an in 2 ways, and they both go back to one core meaning. The most common meaning underlying, for which walking is used is the heart, nuhudul qalb wa niyatuhu wa qasduhu ila Allah. That walking is used in the Qur'an for the heart to direct itself with purpose, nuhud, the heart to rise up and direct itself and intend and resolved to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Seeking His good pleasure, right? And intention itself comes from this meaning, right? Intention, what's the word for intention in Arabic? Niyya. Niyya is to direct yourself to something, right? And directing yourself to something comes up from nahada, You know, there is a stirring of resolve towards a purposeful outcome. And when that resolve gets connected to an act, it's called intention. Right? But intention is a stirring up, as it were, of the heart towards an outcome. Right? So he says, فَالنِّيَّةُ نُهُودُ الْقَلْبِ إِلَى اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. Right? Intention is the heart to rise up through resolve in turning to Allah. Right? Right? And it's driven by what? By reason. By reason. Because by the intellect, the aql. Because the intellect that in which the light of faith shines sees things as they are. And if it sees things as they are, it inclines towards Allah. That's huda. Right? That when iman, which is a light from Allah, enters the heart, it has huda. It has that inclination towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that inclination, when it connects to doing those actions by which you'll turn to Allah, that is called niyyah, intention. And intention is the action of the heart. And that's related to one of the usages in the Qur'an of walking. Because walking in that sense is, the spiritual walk is for the heart to take the spiritual steps to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Right? And the other walking is a simpler walking that's also used in the Qur'an, which is the walking with the footsteps. Some of the walking that's used in the Qur'an, and that's right in the opening when it's talking about the believers and the disbelievers and the bewildered. فَلَمَّا أَضَاءَ لَهُمْ مَشَوْا فِيهِ. When there is light, when things are illumined for them, they walk in that illumination. So that is the walking of the heart. When they have a glimpse of faith, they walk in that light. That's not a walking of footsteps. That's a walking of the heart. Because they direct themselves to Allah. Right? And another example of the walking of the heart, right? Of the heart rising up. Right? Because the heart is in slumber. And then it rises up when the light of faith shines and the inclination of guidance happens. The heart rises up from its slumber and directs itself to Allah. That is walking. That when the resolve is converted into action, that walking, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُ نُورًا يَمْشِي بِهِ فِي النَّاسِ. And we grant them light by which they walk amongst people. And the purpose isn't that they walk around amongst people, because without the light of guidance, do people walk amongst people? Are people just standing around still outside? They walk. This is the walking of the heart. And we placed for them a light by which they walk, i.e., by which their heart is directed to Allah and seeks Allah while they're amongst people, meaning in their worldly affairs. Right? That while they are with other people, engaged in the mundane, through the light of faith, they are walking to Allah in their worldly walking. Be in this world as though a stranger or one journeying, as the Prophet ﷺ said to Ibn Abbas. You are a stranger, you're with them with your body, but your heart is walking to Allah. Right? And the other usages also come in the Qur'an. The disbelievers said, why should we believe in a prophet like this? يمشي في الأسواق, who walks in the marketplace. And that's with the feet. Because that's all they saw of the walking of the Prophet ﷺ. And that's why Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi, in his work, Nawadir al-Usul, talks about when he describes the walking. He has a chapter on the walking of the Prophet ﷺ. And for those of you who know Arabic, and inshallah if you make a note here, Sayyidi, we'll include this. For those of you who do know Arabic, we'll share it with you for under lesson 3. In Nawadir al-Usul, it's a wonderful work where he finds less common narrations of hadiths on critical topics from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. He describes the walking of the Prophet ﷺ, right? The Prophet ﷺ walked as if he was coming down, is like water that was coming down the mountain, or as if he was rolling down the hill, yet he walked with sakina and waqar, with calm and dignity. One of the fascinating things is that, and we can show it, turn the camera sideways. Right. I'll just show that, if you, when you walk quickly, one of the things we don't notice, that if you walk quickly, you go like this, one of the things you won't notice is that, and if we do it slow motion, right? This walking, that when you walk quickly, you take big steps, inevitably, what's happening? Because your feet, when you take a big step, typically they're stepping slightly to the right, slightly to the left. So you're tacking slightly to the right, right? If you imagine there's a center of gravity, slightly to the left, slightly to the right. Even if you're walking straight, you tack a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left, right? The Prophet, a bit like how a ship, when it's sailing, it tacks. If you know anything about the winds, because the wind's blowing, the wind doesn't always blow right from behind you. So in order to be able to sail, you tack a little bit this way, a little bit that way. So similarly, the Prophet ﷺ is described in his walking that he tacked, right? He went slightly, with the right step, he'd go slightly towards the right, then slightly towards the left. So he walked upright, right? He walked standing completely straight. He walked with big, purposeful steps. He walked fast, but unhurried. The young companion said, we used to struggle to keep up with him. Yet he was calm, dignified. He would lower his gaze from anything that was not of concern to him, but yet he'd be the first person to greet others who would pass him by. And even while walking, he would turn fully to a person, even when walking, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If anyone had a need, he would give their full attention to them, even though he was walking intently with purpose. And he would smile at people and greet people and turn towards people. But this tacking is described like a ship cutting through the ocean. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi comments on this, that al-mashyu bil-qalb, because you're walking, in reality, even your physical walking is with the heart. The walking of the heedless is a heedless walk. The walking of the one who's just desirous will be the walking of one desirous. Whether they're walking toward a sinful desire or a desire of the physical appetites. Need to get this pizza place before it closes. So they're walking in accordance with the state of their heart. The one who's, walking of those who are busy with their work concerns and so on. It's one of the annoying things. You're walking, someone's having a business call, on their earpiece, whatever? Right? Are they paying attention to those around? No. It's quite annoying. If you're walking downtown, there's a whole bunch of people who are all like in their own worlds. They're busy, but that's the state of their heart. They're busy with their concerns, their worldly concerns, away from concern for any other. And of course, where is Allah in all that? But the believer's walk is the walking of the heart. Right? Because what moves them is the light of faith, the inclination of guidance, directed through it towards the eternal good and the good of this world for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the walking of the heart that's described in the Qur'an. We place for them a light, that's a light of faith, by which they walk, meaning with their heart. They direct themselves to Allah in all that they direct themselves, whether it would be with their feet or with any other limb, towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's just a little bit about walking, and both walking, and there's other terms like walking that are used in a similar way. We'll see some of them, like the word for travel, sayr. Fasiru fil ard. Travel the lands, but there's a horizontal journeying, which is just cutting physical distances. And there's the traveling of the heart, mind, and soul. That in the physical journey, you are traveling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And we'll see many other such examples. The idea of hijrah, migration. Migration is a physical migration, but it's also a spiritual migration. It's used by that way in the Prophet ﷺ's own usage. Whoever's migration is to Allah and His Messenger. The migration was from Mecca to Medina. But the Prophet ﷺ described the physical migration as a spiritual reality. The migration wasn't from Mecca to Medina. In reality, it was whoever's migration was to Allah and His Messenger. So likewise, that's a little bit about walking. Right? Walking is either a movement of the heart towards a purpose, and the believer's walking is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It rises out of the heart being stirred from the slumber of sloth through some purpose to that direction through some action. Right? So that's a little bit about walking. The second concept is the concept of dress, libas. Right? And libas is used in the Qur'an in at least 5 meanings. But the root, the core sense of libas is al-ghita, is that which covers. That which covers. Right? That which covers another thing. So you can make ilbas. Albasahu tajan. He covered their head with a crown. Right? As mentioned about the parents of the one who memorizes the Qur'an. Ulbisa walidahu tajan min nur. Their parents will be made to dress, i.e., their head will be covered with a taj, a crown of light. ضوءه أحسن, right? من ضوء الشمس في بيوت الأرض, whose light is more dazzling than the light of the sun as it shines into the houses of this world. Imagine when the sun is high, how it shines if you open the window. The crown on one's parents' heads in the hereafter, they'll be honored by their children's memorizing Qur'an more than that. And that's just by memorizing. Then the Prophet ﷺ asked, فَمَا بَالُكَ بِمَنْ عَمِلَ بِهَا. So what can you imagine is the reward of the parents whose children not only memorize the Qur'an, but then act upon it. Meaning act upon it towards its perfections. Not just, of course, learning the Qur'an without acting on its basic limits could be a case against the child, right? So So libas is that which covers. Dress is that which covers. But libas is used from that idea of covering. Libas is used for the first of the 5 usages is for that which causes confusion. Iltabasa. For one thing to be covered by another. Because when truth, for example, is covered by falsehood, this is iltabasa. Because the truth has become, it's not clothed in false, because it got covered over. This is one of the usage of, then you're mixed. Is it true or is it false? Well, there was truth, but it got covered over by falsehood. Right? Okay? Because in anything, the truth is always affirmed. So when you mix the truth with falsehood, so a lie is called iltibas. Why? Because you confused the way things actually are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the spouses that they are a libas for you. They are, it's translated as they're a garment for you. And you are a garment for them. How? Because they cover you. Now that which covers you gives you what? Gives you comfort and serenity. Because imagine now it's getting cold. So your own backyard, let's say it's fully protected. If you went outside at Fajr time, wearing just your pajama bottoms, would you be comfortable? It's cold. But if you went there, properly dressed, right? You're clothed. But what does the clothing do? It provides you comfort. Right? Provides you comfort. They are hunna libasul lakum. They are a garment for you, meaning they are a comfort for you. They are a comfort for you. Because they cover you. Which it has the meaning of, therefore, they're a cover for you. They give you comfort, security, serenity, and many other implications of so it can refer to comfort. It can also refer to, comfort in terms of place and in terms of this serenity. They're also, one spouse is a comfort also, a comfort from the discomfort of desire. They're comfort also from the discomfort of desire. Because they cover the discomfort of desire with the comfort of its fulfillment. Libas, so there's 2 senses of comfort, right? That you are comfortable in general, right? That the clothing, that they're comfort, but also a comfort from desire. A 4th meaning of dress is just a physical clothing, right? That which covers your body, because for the obvious reasons. And this used, for example, in Surah Al-Hajj, وَلِبَاسُهُمْ فِيهَا حَرِيرٌ, and their dress in paradise will be silk. That's physical dress, right? Another of the meanings of libas is the spiritual clothing, right? Which has come, وَلِبَاسُ التَّقْوَى, right? The garment of taqwa. That is superior. It's not optional. So if you're going into the street, say, today I'm not going to wear physical dress, I'm going to wear taqwa. We say, have taqwa and put your physical dress on, right? That libasul taqwa, which is to act, is to clothe yourself with good works. Al-amalu salih, right? To act mindfully, to cover disobedience to Allah to cover the potential of disobedience to Allah in action or states by covering yourself with good action and good traits of character. And that's libas al-taqwa, the clothing, but it comes from that which covers you. Because stripped of the dress of good deeds, what are you? You're naked. And before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not the physical clothes you wear, but the spiritual clothing that you are wearing. Right? Which the outer dress is your actions, and the inner dress, right, is your character and your sincerity. The outward actions without good outward actions without good character and good intentions is a bit like putting on a nice business suit but without a shirt and pants. It's still better than being completely naked, but the direct dress is your good character and your sincerity. And then the completion of that is the requisite outward actions. Right? So just to recap, libas comes from the meaning of covering, that which covers. It's used in the Qur'an with the meaning of confusing, because falsehood covers the truth. And it's used in that way, for example, in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 42. وَلَا تُلْبِسُ الْحَقَّ بِالْبَاطِلِ. Don't cover the truth with falsehood. We wouldn't say don't clothe. Sometimes used kind of like that in English. Don't clothe the truth with falsehood, meaning cover it. Right? The idea of serenity, وَجَعَلَ اللَّيْلَ سَكَنًا. Right? And Allah has made the night as a rest, because the night covers over the day, therefore you have rest. Right? The third of the terms that we wanted to look at today is the word su'. Right? Which is evil or that which is ill. Right? And there are 8 different usages of the idea of su', of ill or evil in the Qur'an. He'll go through them. But broadly, we have 2 concepts. We have al-hasan and as-su', the good and the evil. And they're opposites. Al-husn wa su', and you have al-hasan wa sayyi'. Right? Good or the virtuous and the evil. Right? So you have a good deed, al-amalul hasan, and you have al-amalul sayyi', a good action and an evil action, or an ill act. Right? A good deed is called a hasana. It's used in that way in the Qur'an. An ill act is called a sayyi'ah. Right? An ill act. An act of obedience, an act of disobedience. That's why one of the names for Jannah is Al-Husna. Al-Husna, which is the absolute good. And one of the names for hell is As-Su', the ill. Right? Daru-Su', the abode of evil. Right? Hell. Right? So this is how, from this idea of good and evil, if we refer to an act, we call it al-hasan or sayyi, or to a place, to an act of obedience, it's called hasana, to a sinful act, it's called sayyi'ah, all from this idea of good and evil, right? So su', and of course this requires distinction, because there's characteristics that make an action good, there's characteristics that make them evil. How do we know what is good? We know it by knowledge, because knowledge shows us how things are, not just how they appear, right? And it can that idea of good can be applied to a place, and the place of good, of course, is the hereafter, al-husna, which is paradise. Right? And it's come in that sense in the Qur'an, for example, وَيَجْزِي الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِالْحُسْنَى, and for Allah to requite those who have done good bil-husna, with the great good. And the al-husna there, its tafsir has come that it is paradise itself. That's from Surah An-Najm, verse 31. Right? And in Surah Ar-Rum, verse 10, the opposite is true as well, for su'. ثم كان عاقبة الذين أساءوا السوء. Right? السوء. And then the end of those who have done evil is the evil abode, meaning hell. Right? So Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi explains that from the good, from al-hasan يتولد السرور, from the good happiness arises. Okay, from the good happiness arises. And from ومن السوء يتولد المأساة, and from evil arises or is born ma'sa, regret and sorrow. Right? That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, من سرته حسنته وساءته سيئاته فهو مؤمن. Whoever is happy due to their good deeds and saddened by their evil deeds, that is the believer. Right? It's a sound hadith. And he says, and happiness is manifest on the face, and sorrow, right, or loss, dismay, the opposite of happiness, sadness. And this is a sadness of loss, and dismay is also manifest on the face. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the believers, وَلَقَّاهُمْ نَضْرَةً وَسُرُورًا, and Allah granted them nadratan, radiance, and surur, and great happiness. Right? From Surah Al-Insan, verse 11. But the opposite is also true of those who did evil. Right? And from Surah Al-Mulk, verse 27, towards the end of Surah Al-Mulk, فَلَمَّا رَأَوْهُ زُلْفَةً سِيئَتْ وُجُوهُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. And when they saw it close, the faces of those who had disbelieved, سِيئَتْ, they became filled with woe and loss and regret, from the root of su', that evil and ill has ill, it results in sorrow, regret, and loss. Right? Right? So Allah tells us in the Qur'an this meaning, right? That happiness, surur, is connected with the good. I mean, happiness that lasts is connected with the good. Not just whether it be in this life, but certainly eternally. And loss, remorse, regret is connected with evil. Loss, sadness and regret that lasts is connected with evil. Right? Right? And that's why you see that Sayyidah Aisha relates that دخل علي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, that the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم entered upon me, meaning entered her home. Right? وأسارير وجهه تبرق. Right? And the entirety of his face was exuding light. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? And it's part of a lengthier hadith which he references, right? Right? And but there is a reality to good, right? Right? There's a reality to good, and why it results in happiness, right? Because the good is from when the attributes of Allah's beauty are manifest. And when the attributes of Allah's beauty are manifest, it's related to Allah's being pleased. Right? So the good, the al-hasan, the good, relates to the manifestation of Allah's attributes of beauty. The sifat al-jamal. And they're related to the divine good pleasure. The divine good pleasure. So, when you characterize yourself with good deeds, good traits of character, you are these become points of manifestation of divine beauty. Right? And just as that with respect to Allah, when the attributes of divine beauty are manifest, that's where you have the divine good pleasure manifest. So when you exemplify the good yourself, it is a given that you will find happiness. You'll find being pleased. Right? You'll find being pleased. And the basis of evil is what he refers to as the shadow of God. The shadow of God. Right? Meaning the manifestation of the attributes of Allah's wrath. There's the attributes of Allah's beauty and mercy, which bequeath joy. There's the attributes of Allah's wrath and displeasure. Right? So if you characterize by your choices the actions that are that are ill, it's a given that these are displeasing to Allah. What will you find within? You will be displeased. You will not find lasting happiness or pleasure or satisfaction by these attributes, because that's not their metaphysical nor spiritual nature. right? Right? So this is the underlying sense of su', right? Now, su' is used in these in various senses in the Quran. Amongst them, shidda, intensity, right? So, for example, yasumunakum su al-adab, right? They seek for you intense punishment, right? It's not just evil punishment, but intensity, right? From Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 49. Right? And su is also used to refer to that which ties down the camel. Why? Because the camel dislikes being tied down. So it's connected with that. Zina is referred to as su' in the Qur'an. Why? Because it is from darkness. It's from darkness. Right? And the connection is obvious. Right? Sickness, such as like a contagious sickness, is also referred to the Qur'an in like baras, like what's it called, like a a plague or leprosy, right? And that's when Sayyidina Musa brought out his hand, told to put his hand inside his garments and bring it out. It came out white, bayda min ghayri su', right? It came out completely white, but without su', without evil, meaning without being sickly, right? Without being sickly. Shirk has come in multiple places in the Quran, associating partners of Allah as su', right? Right? And you can see one example from it's many places in the Quran where it has come, right? Insults are called su', that don't speak with su', meaning don't insult. Sins have been used as su' in the Quran. But also, because su' is the ill or evil, but also that which is displeasing. So it's also used for the meaning, poverty has been called su'. Halatu su' is a state of poverty. It's not an evil state, but insofar as it is displeasing naturally to a person. So these are some of the usages of evil, right? But the most important insight here is not the various meanings of su' here, but this core idea, right? That there are two realities. There's the hasan, the good, and there's a su', right? And they're both from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ultimately. But which we choose either manifests for us the attributes of divine beauty and mercy, and they result in Allah's good pleasure, because Allah is pleased with the beautiful, the merciful, the good, and it relates to His pleasure. So when we choose the hasan, it's natural that we find lasting pleasure and happiness. And the opposite is true with the su', the evil, that manifests what Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi refers to as dhillullah, the shadow of Allah. And that's the dark shadow, because there's a shadow of light in the hereafter. But in this life, the shadow of God, meaning it is the attributes of Allah's wrath and rigor. Okay? And they result in the displeasure of Allah. If you exemplify, make the choices that relate to that, which is the evil, the su', what will you find? It's inevitable that if this is what Allah is displeased with, you will find displeasure. The Prophet ﷺ talked about when people are tested. فَمَنْ رَضِيَ فَلَهُ الرِّضَى. Whoever is pleased shall find good pleasure. وَمَنْ سَخِطَ فَعَلَيْهِ السُّخْطِ. And whoever is displeased shall find displeasure. That's with respect to how you respond to what Allah sends you, but that's also true in the other way around, in terms of what you send to Allah. If you do what is pleasing, you will find divine good pleasure, and you will be pleased. If you do what is displeasing, you'll find divine displeasure, but you will find displeasure and discomfort. Okay? There are many words for loss in the Qur'an. The fourth, sorry, I'm bad with words. Should say 4. Just give me 1 second. Part 4. Sorry, I don't know why. The fourth term we're going to look at today is one of the words for loss, which is khizi. And we'll look at that. Right? And khizi is a regretful loss. It's a regretful loss. Right? Khizi is the loss you experience when you had a blessing and you no longer have it. It's taken from you. Right? So, and there's 2 types of loss of blessing. If you lose a worldly blessing that you have, called khizyud dunya. This is a worldly loss. You had a blessing. You had health, you lost it. You had wealth, you lost it. But if you lose a next worldly blessing, that is loss. That's a next worldly loss. Right? 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 And of course, and anyone who loses a blessing and such that they feel regret and remorse, that is khizi. Right? And he explains some related words. Right? So, its usages, right? Its usages, that this idea of khizi, it's used, just loss of a blessing, is used for the meaning of adab, punishment. Right? Punishment. Right? Because punishment is for the servant to be prevented from blessing. That's what punishment is. Right? Because and actually there's an interesting relationship between adab, punishment or torment, and the which is punishment, which is that which because punishment comes from prevention, something being deprived of another. Right? What is punishment? Khizi, or from that adab, is the prevention, the loss or prevention of blessings. So water is called azb, sweet, because what mixes with water that changes its taste? What mixes with water that changes its taste? Salt. Naturally. Sugar doesn't normally mix with water naturally, but salt. Right? Because salt drains into water, because water dissolves salt in the soil and so on, right? So pure water, ma'an azban. Right? Pure, it's sweet water. Why? Because it was prevented, it remained protected from salt mixing into it. Right? Which makes, even at home, just try, just room temperature, Put a little bit of salt in the water, try to drink 2 cups of it. Will it be comfortable? No. Right? But that's a separate thing. And it's come in hadith, actually from the saying of Sayyidina Ali, and that's why you have to know Arabic. Sayyidina Ali said, أَعْذِبُوا نِسَاءَكُمْ مِنَ الْخُرُوجِ. I've seen it translated as, punish your women by not leaving the house. He said, not. He said, no. Adab is what? Is prevention. Right? Meaning prevent your women from leaving the house inappropriately. That's what it is. Not punish your wives from. Like, why would a religion of mercy say punish your wives by not leaving the house, right? Imna'u, prevent from inappropriate leaving, right? Khizi is also this idea of loss, deprivation of blessing. It's used in the Qur'an for destruction, halaka, right? Because the one who is destroyed lost all blessing, right? Khizi is also used for being humiliated. People had worldly blessings and they were humiliated by the loss of them as a punishment. So they experienced loss. And it could be merely worldly loss, which is not so bad because one may learn from that and change. Or it could be worldly and next worldly, which is manifest loss. That same idea of being deprived has a sense of dhul, of being abased, right? Right? As happened to the past peoples who had blessing and bless after blessing and honor after honor, but they responded with ingratitude, so they're punished by the deprivation of blessings, and they were humiliated on the earth. Right? Khizi, loss. Sometimes there's a deprivation of blessings, and fadiha, and being exposed. Why? Because one of the greatest blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon us is satr. Is Allah's covering over our faults and shortcomings. Right? Which is mentioned as such a great blessing. And the satr is not just of our deeds, but even of our states. Right? Would you interact with people? Because even what Allah manifests and hides for us. Right? What does Allah manifest for us? Our faces, our hands, our feet. Right? Now feet, some people have fetishes, but most people, these are beautiful and dignified parts of the body. Imagine if people would, you walking around, just see people's backsides and knees and the insides of their stomachs, right? Would you want to interact with people like that? No. You have to go to the receptionist and you'd be staring at their rear end or at their stomach entrails. But Allah covers us at all kinds of levels. Allah covers over our thoughts. Imagine if you could see the thoughts of people rather than their faces. Would you want, most of the time, except with really good people, would you want to interact with people? Right? They give you a fake smile, but what if you could actually see their thoughts? When your neighbor says, "Good evening," but they're like, "Oh, those Muslims." Okay, alhamdulillah, but that's why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses in the Qur'an the term khizi with the meaning of humiliation. Why? Because when you're deprived of the blessing of the satr of Allah's concealing. Right? And that is genuine, humiliation. Right? So these are a few of the terms, right? Of the most important of these that we saw today was this idea of walking, right? That walking, the physical walking, but walking, you walk when there's a welling up of determination and there's a destination. That's when the feet then follow that welling up of determination towards a purpose. But the true walking is spiritual, right? When there's a welling up of resolve to seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, resulting in taking the acts to draw closer to Allah, right? So we saw that. And the idea of dress, which is what covers over. And there's the covering over of confusion, the different types of covering over. And then the covering over of our dress. There's a covering over, the covering of a place that's libas, that gives you serenity. But also the covering of our desires, which is libas. They are a garment for you, they give you worldly comfort. But they also give you, they cover your desires through their fulfillment. But the greatest libas, the greatest dress is taqwa, is to clothe the nakedness of your neediness through good deeds. And we talked about that, right? And we talked also about, just before, loss and evil. And this world is between light and dark. Light, which is the good, is a manifestation of the attributes of Allah's beauty and mercy. There's evil, and there's a wisdom in evil. That's a shadow of God, right? It is the manifestation of Allah's attributes of wrath, right? And rigor. One results, and in our acts that are good, it results in our lasting pleasure and happiness. And that's one of the, and when we make choices of evil, that results in loss and regret and remorse, unavoidably. Right? That's why Ibn Atta'illah says, كل ما وجدته القلوب من الهموم والأحزان فلأجل ما منعت من الشهود والعيان. All that hearts find of loss and remorse is but the result of their being deprived of witnessing and beholding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. Because truly it is only by the remembrance of Allah that hearts find rest. So that's what we wanted to cover today. Next lesson, which will be lesson 4, we'll be looking at over 10 usages of mercy in the Qur'an. And the term furqan, the criterion, that which separates the good and the evil, light and darkness, etc. And this amazing word of qanitun, right? The devoted, from which we have the dua of qunut, right? In witr, and for Shafi'is and others in their fajr, right? But the Prophet ﷺ said, أفضل الصلاة طول القنوت. The best of prayer is lengthy devotion. So what does it mean? And 9 usages of the term dhikr, remembrance, right? So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us mercy, to grant us the criterion, grant us to be devoted and to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina wa Nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Any questions before we close?